Welcome to the Sleepy Scribe. Your endless internet wandering has brought you here, and hopefully you can finally sleep to today's topic. Now, before we begin, comment where you are listening from, and how late it is where you are. It is so very interesting to see how far and wide people come to listen. Lastly, if you enjoy these videos, please subscribe, it would be very appreciated. Now, let us begin. In the gentle twilight of Tudor England, a kingdom poised between the old and the new, a boy was born who would come to shape the very destiny of a nation with his desires, his fury, and his unyielding will. This was Henry Tudor, who would ascend as King Henry, a monarch whose love life was as tempestuous and grand as the roaring seas and whose every affection stirred the courts, whispered in halls, and echoed through history itself. Imagine a sprawling palace, its stone walls heavy with secrets, tapestries rich with embroidered tales, and candlelight flickering over faces both eager and cautious, where courtiers jostled for favor like ships seeking harbor in a storm. Here, amidst velvet and gold, Henry's story began, not just as a ruler, but as a man tangled in passion, power, and betrayal. Henry was no ordinary prince. Tall and broad, with a mane of fiery auburn hair that caught the light like a flame, he carried himself with the confidence of a lion prowling his domain. His laugh could fill a room, warm and inviting, yet beneath it lurked the restless hunger of a soul seeking something more than crowns and scepters. The boy grew to embody the Renaissance ideal, a skilled jouster, a master musician, a lover of fine art and even finer company. Yet, as dawn follows dusk, beneath the glittering surface, the shadows of his desires began to deepen, foretelling the storms ahead. His first great love was Catherine of Aragon, a woman of noble blood and resolute spirit, whose quiet grace and dignity captured the young king's heart and steadied the turbulent court. Their marriage was a union of politics and passion, forged to cement alliances and bring peace between kingdoms. Yet it was also a love story whispered through the corridors, filled with tender moments beneath vaulted ceilings and promises made under the watchful eyes of stars. But even the strongest vows can fray under the weight of time and expectation, and Catherine's inability to provide Henry with a male heir planted the first seeds of doubt, a shadow stretching slowly across their gilded marriage. Picture now the royal chambers, heavy drapes drawn to shield the lovers from prying eyes, the scent of rosewater mingling with the faint tang of burning wood. Henry, eager and restless, sought comfort and certainty in Catherine's arms, only to be met with the cruel silence of empty beds and whispered prayers. His frustration grew, a tempest barely contained behind his regal mask, for in those years, a son was not just a blessing but a necessity, a lifeline for a dynasty that trembled on the edge of uncertainty. The court buzzed with rumors, whispers slipping like silk through the fingers of nobles and servants alike, of Henry's growing impatience and the rise of a new figure whose very name would ignite the flames of scandal and change. Anne Boleyn, a lady-in-waiting with sharp wit and eyes that sparkled with defiance, stepped into Henry's life like a sudden storm, sweeping away the remnants of old promises. Her laughter was a song that echoed in the king's ears, her presence a challenge to the established order. She was no meek consort but a woman of ambition and cunning, whose charm held the power to both enchant and unsettle. Their courtship was a delicate dance of stolen glances, secret letters folded with care, and whispered declarations beneath the arches of royal gardens where the scent of blooming jasmine filled the air with promise and peril. Yet this dance carried a price, for to pursue and meant defying not just Catherine but the very church itself, and the repercussions would ripple far beyond the palace walls. The kingdom stood on the brink of upheaval, the quiet hum of religious dissent stirring beneath the surface as Henry sought a way to dissolve his marriage, igniting a firestorm of political and spiritual turmoil. The Pope's refusal to annul the union forced Henry's hand, leading him down a path that fractured Christendom and birthed the Church of England, a schism born from desire as much as doctrine. It was a bold gambit, one that crowned Henry not only as a king of flesh and blood but as the supreme head of the church, intertwining his personal lust with the fate of millions. Within these turbulent times, love, power, and faith collided, weaving a tapestry as complex and vivid as the stained glass windows that caught the morning sun in the chapel of Westminster. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the castle battlements, Henry's court prepared for a wedding unlike any other, a ceremony that would seal a new chapter of passion and peril. Anne Boleyn, radiant and resolute, ascended the steps to meet her king, her eyes glinting with both hope and the fierce knowledge of the dangers ahead. The halls whispered with anticipation, the air thick with secrets and silent prayers, for all who watched knew this was no ordinary union but the fulcrum upon which history would pivot. In that moment, beneath the vaulted ceilings and golden chandeliers, the stage was set for a saga of love and betrayal that would echo through the ages, a story as intoxicating and unpredictable as the man who ruled the land. Would Henry's heart find the solace it sought, or would the shadows of ambition and jealousy tear apart all he held dear? The tale had only just begun, and as the night deepened, the kingdom held its breath, poised on the edge of desire and destiny, awaiting the next chapter in the scandalous life of King Henry. As dawn stretched its pale fingers across the sky, the castle stirred with restless energy, the echoes of the previous night's promises and whispered schemes still lingering like the soft scent of lingering incense. Henry, now crowned not just by the crown but by his own will as head of church and state, found himself walking a narrow path between ecstasy and peril. Anne Boleyn, with her fiery spirit and sharp mind, was no mere consort. She was a queen in her own right, a storm wrapped in silk and diamonds, whose ambition burned as brightly as Henry's own. Their union, born of desire and defiance, was a symbol of transformation, a declaration that the old world was giving way to a new order where love and power danced in dangerously intricate steps. Yet, beneath the shimmering surface of courtly pageantry, darker shadows gathered. Anne's inability, or perhaps unwillingness, to produce the longed-for male heir cast ripples of doubt and unrest. Court whispers turned to murmurs of conspiracy, and Henry's once boundless passion showed signs of fraying like the edges of a treasured tapestry caught in a storm. Imagine the royal chambers where the king paced, his heavy boots muffled by plush rugs, his face a mask of frustration and longing, as Anne sat poised by the window, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the cool glass, eyes distant yet fierce. The tension between them was a tempest held at bay by etiquette and obligation, but it threatened to break free in thunderous waves. Into this charged atmosphere stepped Jane Seymour, a lady whose quiet beauty and gentle demeanor offered a stark contrast to Anne's fiery blaze. Jane was like a soft breeze on a scorching day, a whisper of calm in a world turned chaotic. Her smile, shy yet sincere, caught Henry's eye and stirred in him a yearning for peace, for the kind of steady affection that might soothe the restless king's soul. Their encounters were woven with moments of laughter and gentle touches, a balm to wounds carved by ambition and heartbreak. But Henry's court was a battlefield where love and power clashed ceaselessly, and Jane's rise did not go unnoticed. Anne, aware of the shifting tides, played her role with a mixture of grace and steel, masking fear beneath a veneer of regal composure. The courtiers, those ever-watchful shadows, whispered rumors like falling leaves in autumn winds, speculations that fueled rivalries and hardened alliances. As Henry's affections turned increasingly toward Jane, the fractures in his marriage with Anne widened. The Queen's fate became a question whispered in darkened corridors and behind closed doors, a secret carried on the breath of servants and nobles alike. The air thickened with a sense of impending doom, as if the very stones of the palace held their breath. The great hall, where once joyous celebrations had filled the air with music and mirth, now echoed with hushed conversations and wary glances. Henry's relentless quest for a son, a symbol of divine favor and dynastic security, cast a long shadow over every gathering. Then came the moment when the fragile balance shattered. Anne Boleyn, once the beloved and bold queen, was arrested on charges of adultery, incest, and treason, accusations that many believed to be fabrications born of jealousy and political maneuvering. Her trial, a spectacle of spectacle, exposed the raw underbelly of Tudor power, where love was weaponized and betrayal writ large on the canvas of the kingdom. The corridors that had echoed with her laughter now held silence heavy with sorrow and fear. Henry, torn between love, duty, and his insatiable hunger for a male heir, watched as Anne's life unraveled like a tapestry snagged and torn. Her final days were filled with courage and despair, her voice a whispered defiance against the fate imposed upon her. And so, beneath the cold gaze of the executioner's block, Anne's story reached its tragic crescendo, a moment that would haunt Henry and the kingdom forever, a dark stain upon a reign marked by passion and ruthlessness. But the wheel of fate turned relentlessly onward. From the ashes of scandal and loss rose Jane Seymour, whose gentle strength promised the son Henry so desperately desired. The kingdom held its breath once more, awaiting the arrival of the future king, while beneath the surface, the intricate dance of love, power, and betrayal continued, an endless story woven into the very fabric of Tudor England. In the quiet hush of early morning, long before the court stirred and the first beams of sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, the palace whispered secrets of hope and sorrow. Jane Seymour, with her pale complexion and soft brown eyes, moved through the halls like a gentle breeze, unassuming yet resolute, carrying with her the fragile promise of a future that Henry craved more than gold or glory. Unlike the fiery Anne Boleyn, Jane was the embodiment of patience and quiet strength, a balm to a king whose heart had been scorched by passion and betrayal. Their union was less a tempest and more a gentle tide, washing over the tumultuous years with a steady, calming rhythm that spoke of the healing power of love unadorned by drama or spectacle. Henry, who had once roared with desire and fury, found in Jane a companion whose calm demeanor softened the sharp edges of his courtly life, offering a sanctuary from the storm that was his reign. Yet even in this peaceful interlude, the ever-turning wheel of fate refused to pause. The long-awaited heir arrived, a son named Edward, whose cry filled the chambers with a joy that seemed to momentarily quiet the restless spirits of the palace. His birth was a victory not only for Henry's dynastic ambitions, but for the fragile hopes of a kingdom caught between old faith and new order. The infant prince's tiny fingers curled around the future, a symbol of promise wrapped in swaddling clothes and dreams. But joy, like the flickering candlelight in the vast halls, was fragile and fleeting. Jane's delicate health waned as swiftly as the seasons changed, and the palace soon held its breath in mourning. Her death, following the birth of Prince Edward, cast a pall over the court, a sorrow so deep it seemed to echo in every stone and shadow. Henry's grief was a storm held just beneath the surface, a raw wound covered by regal composure but known to those close enough to see the flicker of pain behind his eyes. Yet even as the king mourned, the relentless currents of politics and passion surged forward. The court, a living, breathing organism of ambition and desire, quickly refocused on the future, on new alliances, new marriages, and new battles for power cloaked in silk and whispered promises. Enter Anne of Cleves, a woman whose arrival was heralded with hope and calculated diplomacy, a union designed not for passion but for political alliance. She was a stranger to Henry, a foreign princess whose portrait had been painted with flattering strokes but whose reality fell short of the king's expectations. Their marriage, cold and awkward, was a far cry from the fiery passion of past queens. Henry's disappointment was palpable, his famously blunt words cutting through the court like a winter chill. "I like her not," he declared, turning his back on the marriage that was supposed to secure peace between kingdoms. The annulment came swiftly, a reminder that in Henry's world, love was never far from politics, and neither was betrayal. Anne of Cleves, spared the fate of some of Henry's other wives, was granted a generous settlement and the curious title of the king's sister, living out her days in relative comfort but far from the throne. Yet, Henry's restless heart would not be stilled. His gaze soon turned to Catherine Howard, a young and vivacious cousin of Anne Boleyn, whose youth and beauty rekindled the king's desires. Catherine was like a breath of spring after a harsh winter, her laughter light and intoxicating, her spirit wild and untamed. The court buzzed with excitement and caution, aware that such passions often carried dangerous consequences. But the heady romance was built on fragile foundations. Catherine's past, a tapestry woven with secrets and youthful indiscretions, began to unravel under the relentless scrutiny of the Tudor court. The king's favor, once lavished with affection, cooled as whispers of betrayal grew louder. The scandal that followed was swift and brutal, a stark reminder that in Henry's England, love was entwined with power, and betrayal was met with a blade's cold finality. Catherine's downfall, like Anne Boleyn's before her, was a cautionary tale of desire and danger, a chapter in the endless story of a king whose heart was as tumultuous as the seas that battered the English coast. Yet even as the shadows lengthened over the palace and the echoes of loss reverberated through the corridors, the story of Henry's love affairs continued, a vivid tapestry of passion, power, and betrayal that wove together the fate of a man and a nation. The heavy wooden doors of Hampton Court creaked open with a sound that seemed to echo through the endless halls, carrying with it the footsteps of a man whose very presence commanded attention and dread in equal measure. Henry VIII, now well into his reign and the fuller weight of years and experiences, bore the marks of a king hardened by passion, betrayal, and the relentless demands of power. His once fiery auburn hair had begun to darken and recede, but his eyes still burned with that unmistakable intensity, a spark of desire and iron will that refused to be dimmed. His frame, once lithe and athletic, had grown broad and imposing, a physical manifestation of the immense burdens he carried as monarch, lover, and lawmaker. Behind him trailed a court as vibrant and volatile as the man himself, a swirling mix of nobles, ladies, jesters, and schemers, each playing their parts on a stage that stretched from the grandest halls to the whispered shadows beyond. The year was now well into the 1540s, a time when the tides of change were sweeping through England with an unstoppable force, and Henry's personal life continued to unfold like a richly embroidered drama, dense with intrigue and delicate balances of power. After the tragic demise of Catherine Howard, Henry found himself once again caught in the web of companionship and longing, though now tempered by experience and a wary heart. His next marriage was to Catherine Parr, a woman whose intellect and gentle nature brought a semblance of peace and stability that had been elusive in years past. Catherine Parr was unlike the previous queens. She was a scholar and a caregiver, tending not only to Henry's physical ailments as he grew older and less vigorous, but also to the spiritual and emotional scars carved by decades of love and loss. Their relationship was marked by respect and companionship, a quieter kind of affection that, while lacking the fiery passion of earlier days, provided a vital refuge amid the tempest of court politics. Picture the two of them walking through the palace gardens at twilight, the soft glow of lanterns illuminating their path as they discuss matters of theology and governance, their voices low and thoughtful, weaving together threads of faith and pragmatism. Catherine's influence extended beyond the personal, as she encouraged Henry to reconcile with his daughters and fostered an environment where the fractured family could find moments of fragile unity. Yet the shadows of the past clung stubbornly to Henry's court. The ghosts of his former wives lingered like faint echoes in the corridors, and Boleyn's defiant spirit whispered in the laughter of children. Catherine Howard's youthful beauty remained a bittersweet memory etched in portraits and song. Henry himself wrestled with the weight of his legacy, the knowledge that his passions had carved a path lined with both triumph and tragedy. The once vibrant king, whose laughter had filled grand halls and whose desires had reshaped a nation's destiny, now faced the twilight of his reign with a mixture of regret and acceptance. Still, even as his strength waned and his temper grew more unpredictable, Henry remained a figure of awe and fear, a man who had forever altered the course of English history through his relentless pursuit of love and power. As the castle settled into the hush of night, and the flickering candlelight cast long shadows on tapestries depicting ancient kings and battles, the story of Henry VIII continued to unfold, a tale of passion and betrayal, ambition and loss, woven into the very fabric of a kingdom whose fate was inseparable from the man who ruled it. The tapestry of Henry's reign was stitched not only with grand political upheavals and seismic religious shifts, but with the intimate, tangled threads of love and desire that colored every corner of his world. Among the court's whispered tales, none captivated hearts and minds quite like the passionate and perilous romance of Anne Boleyn, whose rise and fall read like a tempestuous ballad sung beneath the moonlit sky. To understand Anne is to picture a woman of uncommon intelligence and fierce ambition, with eyes like glinting obsidian that could charm the most stoic noble and a tongue sharpened by wit and determination. She was a storm wrapped in finery, her presence a blaze of color in a world often painted with the muted hues of duty and decorum. Born into a noble family, Anne's education in the courts of France and the Netherlands had polished her into a jewel of refinement and intrigue, her letters a dance of clever language and subtle defiance. When Anne stepped into the English court, she brought with her not only beauty but a spark that ignited the king's restless heart. Their courtship was no simple affair of exchanged glances and stolen moments. It was a complex game of power and passion, a dance on a razor's edge where each step could lead to triumph or ruin. Imagine the secret meetings in shadowed corridors, the soft rustle of silk dresses and the quickened heartbeat beneath the watchful eyes of loyal courtiers. And, aware of the dangers, wielded her influence like a finely honed blade, drawing Henry deeper into a web of desire and defiance. Their love was as much a battle as a romance, each testing the limits of loyalty and ambition. The tension culminated in Henry's break with the Catholic Church, a seismic event that rocked Europe and redefined the very soul of England. The king's determination to marry Anne and secure a male heir led to the creation of the Church of England, severing ties with Rome and setting a precedent for royal supremacy that would echo through centuries. Yet, even as Anne was crowned queen amid the fanfare and glitter, her fate was precarious. The court's intrigue was a serpent coiled beneath the velvet cushions of the throne room, ready to strike. Anne's inability to produce a surviving male heir, coupled with enemies who whispered venomous lies, sowed the seeds of her downfall. The charges leveled against her, adultery, incest, treason, were as much political machinations as truths, a tragic culmination of a saga where love and power collided with devastating consequence. In the shadowed chambers where her fate was sealed, Anne met her end with a grace that transcended the cruelty of her sentence, her final moments a poignant testament to a woman who dared to challenge the tides of history. Yet, in the aftermath of Anne's fall, the court did not rest. The cycle of desire, betrayal, and political calculation spun on, weaving new stories of love and ambition that continued to shape the destiny of England and the legacy of its most notorious king. With Anne Boleyn's tragic fall still casting long shadows over the court, Henry's heart and the kingdom's fate seemed suspended in a fragile balance, as if caught between the roaring thunder of past passions and the uncertain calm of what was yet to come. The silence that followed was broken gently by the soft footsteps and quiet presence of Jane Seymour, whose arrival felt like the first light of dawn after a long, storm-ridden night. Jane was the embodiment of serene grace, her pale skin almost luminous beneath the heavy tapestries of the royal chambers, her eyes steady pools of calm that offered Henry a respite from the tempest that had defined his reign. She was unlike any woman who had come before her, not a firebrand nor a schemer, but a tender soul whose quiet strength could soothe the restless king's turbulent spirit. Their courtship unfolded not in grand proclamations or dramatic gestures, but in moments of subtle understanding. Shared glances across candlelit tables, gentle words exchanged in the hushed corridors, and the steady beat of companionship that promised healing and hope. Jane's presence was a balm to Henry's bruised heart, her unwavering loyalty a steady anchor in a sea of uncertainty. When she bore him a son, Edward, the joy that blossomed within the palace walls was as profound as it was fragile, a beacon of promise that seemed to momentarily still the restless tides of fate. Yet the happiness was tempered by Jane's delicate health, a cruel reminder that even the brightest light could flicker and fade. Her death in the days following Edward's birth left Henry bereft, his grief a deep and aching wound that no crown or scepter could soothe. The court mourned with a solemnity that filled the halls with a heavy silence, the echoes of Jane's gentle laughter and quiet strength lingering like a soft refrain in the memories of those who had loved her. The halls of Hampton Court, once alive with the bright laughter of youthful Catherine Howard, grew heavy with the silence of mourning and caution. Henry, now older, his face marked by the wear of years and the weight of crown and consequence, stood amidst the flickering candlelight, a man who had loved fiercely and lost even more. His once broad and commanding frame had thickened, the vitality of his youth tempered by the harsh realities of kingship and a body ravaged by ailments that crept like shadows in the dark. Yet beneath the surface, the king's heart still beat with an unyielding hunger, not just for power, but for companionship, for that elusive connection that had so often slipped through his fingers like sand. Into this quieter, more somber chapter of his life stepped Catherine Parr, a woman whose intelligence and strength would come to both soothe and challenge the aging monarch. She was a learned woman, fluent in Latin and versed in the religious and philosophical debates that roiled England, a steady flame of reason in a court often consumed by chaos and intrigue. Their marriage was unlike any Henry had known, less a tempestuous storm, more a carefully tended hearth, providing warmth and light in the long, dark winters of his final years. Catherine's role went beyond that of wife. She became a nurse to Henry's failing body and a guardian of his fractured family, navigating the treacherous waters of court politics with a grace that won the respect of nobles and commoners alike. Together, they forged a partnership that balanced affection with pragmatism, a union where intellect met desire and duty entwined with compassion. Yet, even as Henry found solace in Catherine's presence, the court remained a stage where ambition and rivalry played out with ruthless precision. The ghosts of past queens lingered still, their stories whispered in the corridors and etched into the stone walls, a constant reminder that love and power in Tudor England were inseparable and often deadly companions. As the years waned, Henry's health declined, and the once vibrant king who had shaped a nation with his passions and decrees became a figure both revered and pitied, a man whose legacy was as tangled and tumultuous as the love affairs that had defined his reign. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the tapestries depicting battles and coronations, silent witnesses to a life lived at the intersection of desire and destiny, a story woven into the very fabric of England's history and whispered through the ages like a bedtime tale both haunting and unforgettable. The chill of late autumn wrapped itself around the stone walls of Hampton Court as Henry VIII, now a king burdened by years and ailments, sat wrapped in heavy velvet robes that did little to shield him from the growing cold both outside and within. His breath came in shallow gasps, the weight of his body pressing down upon a throne that once felt light beneath his youthful vigor. The court buzzed around him with hushed voices and anxious glances, courtiers and servants alike treading softly as if their very steps might shatter the fragile king's remaining strength. Yet even as his body weakened, Henry's mind remained sharp, flickering with memories of fiery loves and fierce battles, both on the field and in the chambers of his heart. The faces of his 6 wives floated before him like ghostly apparitions, Catherine of Aragon, steadfast and dignified, and Boleyn, fiery and tragic, Jane Seymour, gentle and beloved, and of Cleves, distant and diplomatic. Catherine Howard, youthful and doomed, and Catherine Parr, wise and devoted. Each had left a mark upon him, their stories entwined with his own in a tapestry as complex and colourful as the stained glass that caught the dying light of day. In these final days, Henry's thoughts often turned not to the throne or the wars he had waged, but to his children, the fragile hope of the Tudor legacy. Edward, young and crowned in his stead; Mary, fierce and determined; Elizabeth, bright and enigmatic. Their futures were a puzzle Henry could not fully solve, a kingdom poised precariously on the edge of change and uncertainty. The great halls echoed faintly with the distant sound of a lute, a melancholy melody that seemed to weave through the air like a whispered farewell. Catherine Parr sat nearby, reading softly from a book of prayers, her presence a quiet comfort in the turbulent sea of Henry's fading days. She spoke to him not just as a queen, but as a companion who understood the heavy crown of duty and the loneliness that came with it. Outside, the gardens lay shrouded in mist, the vibrant blooms of spring long gone, replaced by the bare branches and fallen leaves that spoke of endings and new beginnings. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a final golden glow over the palace, Henry's thoughts drifted toward the unknown. What legacy he would leave, what tales would be told of his reign, and whether the love and betrayal that had so defined his life would be remembered as tragedy or triumph. The candlelight flickered low, shadows danced across the stone walls, and the great story of King Henry VIII moved quietly toward its close, a tale as vivid and unforgettable as the man himself. The dawn crept slowly over the horizon, spilling soft light into the chambers where Henry VIII lay in a vast bed draped with crimson and gold, the colours once symbols of power now muted by time and illness. The king's breath came in shallow whispers, each one a fragile thread tying him to the world he had ruled with such fiery passion. Around him, the court gathered in quiet reverence, faces etched with the mixture of hope and sorrow that comes when the final chapter of a great life nears its end. Among them were his children, Edward, the young prince who would soon wear the crown; Mary, a woman hardened by exile and faith; and Elizabeth, bright-eyed and sharp-witted, whose future held a promise of a new dawn for England. The tapestry of Henry's reign, woven with threads of love, betrayal, ambition, and faith, seemed to shimmer in the fading light, each story a vivid thread in the grand design of history. As his strength waned, Henry's thoughts wandered back through the years, the vibrant gardens of his youth, the fierce battles on horseback, the intoxicating laughter of Anne Boleyn, the gentle touch of Jane Seymour, the distant smile of Anne of Cleves, the fleeting joy of Catherine Howard, and the steadfast companionship of Catherine Parr. Each memory was a star in the night sky of his mind, shining with its own light and casting shadows that danced just beyond reach. The court physicians, wary yet hopeful, tended to the king with the best knowledge of their time, their remedies a blend of herbs and prayers, their faces solemn beneath powdered wigs and embroidered robes. Outside, the heavy oak doors closed softly against the murmurs of a world waiting beyond the palace walls, a kingdom poised on the cusp of change. Henry's final hours were marked not by the roar of battle or the clamour of court intrigue, but by a quiet dignity, a moment suspended between the mortal and the eternal. As the last flicker of candlelight danced upon the tapestry of saints and kings, the great story of Henry VIII, the lover, the ruler, the man, was drawing to a close, leaving behind a legacy as complex and unforgettable as the man himself. The kingdom stirred with restless energy as word spread that Henry's days were drawing near their end. The grand halls of the palace, once vibrant with music, laughter, and the sharp clash of courtly debate, now echoed with the soft murmur of prayers and anxious whispers. Nobles and servants alike moved carefully through the corridors, each step measured, each glance heavy with unspoken fears. Outside the windows, the gardens lay cloaked in the muted hues of late autumn, leaves swirling like forgotten memories across the stone paths where Henry had once strode with unshakable confidence. His children gathered near, the young Edward, soon to ascend the throne, his face a blend of youthful determination and the heavy burden of legacy; Mary, whose fiery spirit bore the scars of exile and religious strife; and Elizabeth, sharp-witted and watchful, her future yet unwritten but radiant with possibility. Amidst them stood Catherine, steady and compassionate, a final beacon of solace for a king whose life had been marked by passion and turmoil. As Henry's breath grew faint, his mind drifted through the corridors of memory, the grand feasts where alliances were forged and broken, the whispered secrets behind velvet curtains, the intoxicating blend of love and danger that had shaped his reign. He thought of the women who had walked beside him on this turbulent journey, the loyal Catherine, the fiery and the gentle Jane, the diplomatic and the youthful Catherine, and the wise Catherine. Each had left an indelible mark upon his heart and upon history. their stories intertwined with his own in a tapestry as rich and complex as the realm he ruled. Outside, the sky blushed with the first light of dawn, casting a gentle glow over a kingdom poised on the brink of transformation. Henry's final moments were a quiet surrender to the inevitable, a closing of the eyes heavy with the weight of a lifetime lived at the crossroads of love, power, and destiny. And as the world held its breath, the great tale of Henry's life moved forward, its echoes carried on the winds of time, whispered in the corridors of history, a story never truly ending but forever unfolding. The vast kingdom Henry ruled was held in a fragile balance as the final vestiges of his breath mingled with the cold morning air. Beyond the heavy oak doors of his chamber, courtiers gathered in solemn clusters, their faces masks of loyalty strained by the weight of uncertainty. The sun rose slowly over the English countryside, painting the sky with hues of gold and rose, an ironic contrast to the somber mood that gripped the palace. Inside, the tapestry of Henry's life, woven with passion, power, betrayal, and devotion, seemed to hang suspended in the heavy silence. The memories that danced behind Henry's closed eyes were as vivid as ever. The first time he clasped the hand of Catherine of Aragon, her eyes steady and unwavering, the soft cadence of her voice promising alliance and stability in a world rife with unrest. The intoxicating, dangerous allure of Anne Boleyn, the flick of her dark hair, the sharpness of her wit, and the way she challenged him like a tempest daring the calm sea to roar. Jane Seymour's gentle touch, a balm to the restless king's soul, her quiet strength offering a fleeting glimpse of peace amid the swirling storm of his reign. And of Cleves, whose presence was a discordant note in the symphony of his life, a reminder of politics' cold grip on even the most intimate affairs. Catherine Howard's bright laughter, as fragile and fleeting as a summer breeze, a youthful flame extinguished all too soon by betrayal and courtly cruelty. And Catherine Parr, whose wisdom and steadfastness in these final years had become a tether to the world Henry was about to leave behind. The walls of the chamber seemed to breathe with these memories, the portraits of long-gone monarchs watching silently as Henry's spirit teetered on the edge of eternity. Outside, the future waited in the form of his children, Edward, Mary, and Elizabeth, each bearing the hopes and fears of a nation divided by faith and ambition. Edward, the boy king in waiting, carried the heavy mantle of Protestant reform, his reign destined to reshape England in ways even his father could not fully foresee. Mary, fierce and devout, would later fight to restore the old faith, her fiery heart a force both revered and feared. Elizabeth, sharp and cunning, would rise like a phoenix from the ashes of turmoil to claim a throne that demanded both grace and steel. In this moment of quiet between life and death, Henry's thoughts flickered to these heirs, to the legacy of love and war, of devotion and betrayal that he would leave behind. The heavy silence was broken by the soft footsteps of Catherine Parr, who knelt by the bedside, her hand gently clasping Henry's weathered fingers. Her voice, steady and comforting, spoke words of faith and hope, bridging the chasm between mortal fear and divine promise. The court held its collective breath as the king's final moments unfolded, a poignant close to a reign that had shaped the course of history. As Henry's eyes fluttered open one last time, a flicker of clarity passed through them, an unspoken farewell to a world forever changed by his desires and deeds. And then, as the light of morning bathed the chamber, the great story of Henry's life reached a turning point, not an end, but a passage, a bridge to the turbulent yet hopeful chapters that awaited England in the days to come. Before the heavy weight of the crown settled fully upon Henry's broad shoulders, his youth unfolded like a vivid tapestry of exuberance, ambition, and the intoxicating thrill of newfound power. Born into the turbulent era of late medieval England, Henry grew up surrounded by towering stone castles, lush hunting grounds, and the echoing clang of armored knights preparing for battle. His early days were filled with lessons in swordsmanship, classical literature, and the intricate dance of courtly manners, a world where every gesture carried meaning and every word could shift the fate of men and kingdoms. Imagine the young Henry as a bright flame burning with restless energy, his laughter ringing out over the rolling green fields as he raced horses under the open sky, his fiery hair catching the sunlight like threads of molten gold. He was a prince molded by expectation yet brimming with a personal hunger for greatness, a desire to carve his name deep into the annals of history. Among his earliest loves was Catherine of Aragon, daughter of the Spanish monarchs and a woman whose grace and steadfastness would become both a comfort and a source of conflict. Their marriage, arranged to cement alliances and secure peace, was initially marked by genuine affection, tender moments hidden beneath layers of political strategy. Yet Henry's youth was not defined by this single bond. The royal court, a dazzling stage of intrigue and seduction, offered a tapestry of potential lovers and fleeting romances. Whispers spoke of Mary Boleyn, sister to Anne, whose charm and vivacity caught Henry's wandering eye. Their liaison was one of secret glances and stolen moments, a dance of temptation behind the heavy velvet curtains of palace chambers. Mary's youth and beauty provided a playful reprieve from the rigid constraints of royal duty, a brief interlude in the king's quest for both pleasure and power. But it was Anne Boleyn who would forever change the course of Henry's life. Unlike her sister, Anne was no mere object of desire but a force of nature, a woman whose sharp mind and fierce independence challenged the king in ways few had dared. Their courtship was a perilous game of wit and will, a battle for hearts and crowns that pushed Henry to defy the very church itself. The story of their affair is one painted with vibrant strokes of passion and peril, the secret letters folded with care, the whispered promises beneath moonlit arches, the thrill of danger that hung in the air like the scent of blooming jasmine. Henry's infatuation with Anne was a fire that consumed him, driving him to break with Rome and reshape the religious landscape of England forever. Yet amid these grand dramas were the smaller, quieter affairs, lovers who flickered briefly in the king's life like shooting stars. These relationships, sometimes tender, sometimes scandalous, were threads woven into the complex fabric of Henry's youth and reign. They revealed a man as deeply human as he was king, a man driven by desire, ambition, and the endless search for connection in a world defined by crowns and courts. In the vivid tapestry of Henry's youth, woven with threads of passion, ambition, and relentless energy, the royal court itself was a living, breathing stage where desires and destinies collided beneath tapestries heavy with heraldry and candlelight that flickered like distant stars. As a young prince, Henry was more than a mere heir to the throne. He was a tempest, his spirit blazing with the boundless vigor of youth and the intoxicating promise of power yet to be claimed. The corridors of palaces echoed with the sounds of his footsteps, confident, bold, sometimes reckless, as he strode between lessons in Latin and jousts that sent splinters of wood flying like shooting stars. His laughter was a clarion call that rallied friends and intimidated rivals, a sound that carried through the vaulted halls and into the gardens where the scent of blooming roses mingled with the crisp English air. Among the many faces that flickered through his youthful years, none captured his heart quite like Catherine of Aragon. Their marriage, forged in the fires of political alliance, blossomed initially with genuine affection. Catherine's calm and dignified presence was a harbour in the storm of court life, a steady anchor for Henry's restless heart. Yet beneath the surface, the pressures of producing a male heir and the shifting tides of favour and fortune began to weigh heavily. Henry's gaze, once solely fixed on Catherine, started to wander, drawn to the allure of new and forbidden passions. It was in this swirling maelstrom of court intrigue that Mary Boleyn emerged, a young woman whose charm and vivacity sparked a different kind of flame in the young king's life. Their affair was whispered about in hushed tones, tales of stolen meetings behind thick tapestries and clandestine rendezvous beneath the moon's watchful gaze. Mary was a bright and playful star in Henry's constellation of loves, her laughter a light contrast to the sombre expectations that clung to palace walls. Yet it was Anne Boleyn who would seize Henry's heart and forever alter the course of England's destiny. Anne was a tempest incarnate, her sharp intellect and fierce independence a challenge that both thrilled and unsettled the king. Their relationship unfolded like a high-stakes dance, each step measured but charged with electricity. Anne's refusal to be a mere pawn in royal games set her apart. She was a woman who demanded to be seen and heard, whose very presence ignited the court with a mixture of admiration and fear. Henry's pursuit of Anne was relentless, a desperate and fiery quest that led him to shatter centuries of religious tradition and political order. Their love affair was marked by secret meetings in moonlit gardens where the scent of jasmine and night-blooming roses wrapped around them like a velvet cloak. Letters slipped through hidden hands, filled with declarations as bold as swords and as tender as whispered prayers. This dangerous liaison became the catalyst for monumental change, the king's break from the Catholic Church, the birth of the Church of England, and a kingdom forever divided by faith and politics. Yet, amid the grandeur and upheaval, Henry's youth was also punctuated by quieter moments of desire and vulnerability. Other lovers, some known and others lost to history's shadows, danced briefly in his life, women whose names appear only in the faintest of court records or the softest of rumors. These fleeting relationships, some scandalous, others tender, revealed the man behind the crown, a soul yearning for connection, for understanding, for the warmth of human affection amid the cold grandeur of monarchy. As Henry's youth gave way to the tumult of kingship, these early loves and affairs shaped not only his heart but the very fabric of a nation in flux, an England caught between medieval tradition and the dawn of a new age, with a king whose passions would ignite both his own fate and that of his kingdom in a blaze of desire, betrayal, and unyielding ambition. In the swirling mists of Henry's early courtly life, the line between duty and desire often blurred like watercolor strokes bleeding into one another, creating scenes as vivid as any painted by the masters. The palace was a stage where every glance, every smile, every whispered word could tip the balance between favor and ruin, and young Henry, brimming with vitality, was both actor and audience in this grand drama. His heart was a tempestuous sea, rising and falling with the tides of youthful passion and the winds of ambition that carried him toward the throne. Amid the glittering assemblies and sumptuous feasts, he sought not only alliances and crowns but also the intoxicating promise of love, a force as compelling as the swords that clashed in the jousting tournaments and as unpredictable as the flames that danced in the hearths. His early romances were a cascade of stolen moments and secret rendezvous, where the air was thick with the scent of lavender and rosewater, and the thrill of forbidden affection made even the coldest marble corridors seem alive with warmth. Mary Boleyn, with her playful charm and radiant smile, was one such enchantress, a bright spark who captured the king's fleeting attentions in a world where loyalty and discretion were prized above all. Their affair, whispered about in the shadows of the court, was marked by moments of laughter and light-hearted mischief, a brief respite from the heavy mantle of kingship that awaited Henry. But it was Anne Boleyn who cast the longest and most complicated shadow over Henry's heart, and was no mere courtly beauty. She was a whirlwind of intellect, ambition, and fiery spirit, a woman whose very presence challenged the rigid hierarchies of the time. Their relationship was a tapestry woven with threads of danger and desire, a delicate balance of power that shifted with every meeting and every whispered conversation behind the silken curtains of the royal chambers. Henry's pursuit of Anne was both a personal passion and a political gamble, a daring wager that would cost him dearly yet redefine the very soul of England. The king's relentless devotion to and forced a schism with the Catholic Church, leading to the birth of the Church of England, a move that reshaped the religious and political landscape of Europe. This bold defiance was fueled not only by love but also by an unyielding desire to secure a male heir, to cement his legacy and the future of the Tudor dynasty. Yet amid these grand upheavals, Henry's youthful passions were also coloured by a cast of other lovers, some fleeting, some significant, and all contributing to the complex portrait of a king driven as much by human desire as by royal duty. These women, ladies-in-waiting, noblewomen, and perhaps even commoners whose names have been lost to time, wove through his life like brief, bright flashes, moments of tenderness or scandal that punctuated the relentless march of history. Their stories, often whispered behind closed doors or penned in secret letters, reveal the deeply human side of a man who could command armies and kingdoms yet still be undone by the simplest longing for connection and affection. In these early years, Henry was not merely a monarch in the making but a young man discovering the intoxicating power of love and lust, whose choices would ripple across generations and whose heartbeats would echo in the grand halls of English history forever. As the seasons turned and Henry stepped fully into the role of king, the vibrant fire of his youth began to smoulder with a complexity born of responsibility, desire, and the heavy shadow of legacy. The royal court, a swirling maelstrom of ambition and intrigue, became both his playground and his prison, a place where love could blossom in secret alcoves and be strangled by suspicion before dawn. Among the many faces that flickered through these years, Anne Boleyn stood brightest, a flame that drew Henry irresistibly yet threatened to consume him whole. Their relationship, forged in the secret whispers of moonlit gardens and the stolen brush of fingertips beneath embroidered sleeves, was a daring challenge to the old order, and was unlike any queen before her, fiery, intelligent, and fiercely independent, captivating Henry not just with her beauty but with a mind sharp enough to match his own. Their courtship was a perilous dance of wills, where every word carried weight, every glance a negotiation. It was this dangerous passion that led Henry to shatter the centuries-old ties with the Catholic Church, initiating a religious revolution that would forever alter England's soul. Yet even as their love burned bright, it was shadowed by the relentless pressure to produce a male heir, a demand that would prove both the couple's undoing and the catalyst for one of history's most infamous tragedies. Anne's failure to bear a surviving son, coupled with the venomous machinations of court rivals, culminated in accusations that would end her reign and her life. The charges, adultery, incest, and treason, were as politically motivated as they were personal, a grim testament to the deadly stakes of Tudor courtship. Anne's final moments, marked by courage and dignity, echoed through the ages as a poignant reminder of the perilous intersection of love and power. But Henry's story did not end with Anne. In the wake of such loss, the king's heart and court turned again, seeking new alliances and new loves to steady a kingdom still trembling from upheaval. Jane Seymour entered his life like a gentle dawn, her quiet strength and kindness offering a balm to wounds both visible and hidden. Their marriage, less tempestuous but deeply sincere, brought the long-awaited male heir, Edward, whose birth kindled hope amid the shadows. Yet the fragile joy was soon tempered by tragedy, as Jane's death in childbirth cast a pall over the court and deepened the king's solitude. Still, the relentless tide of politics and passion surged forward, carrying Henry through further marriages and affairs. Each relationship a thread in the complex fabric of his reign, revealing a man as fallible as he was formidable. The youthful energy of Catherine Howard, the pragmatic alliance with Anne of Cleves, and the enduring companionship of Catherine Parr each played their part in the unfolding drama, shaping not only Henry's life but the destiny of a nation poised on the edge of modernity. Through it all, Henry remained a figure of contradictions, a lover and a ruler, a man capable of deep tenderness and ruthless cruelty, whose passions ignited the fires of change and whose legacy would be written in both love and blood. In the grand tapestry of Henry's life, the threads of youthful vigor and seasoned kingly authority wove together in patterns as intricate as the embroidered silks that adorned the royal court. As he moved from the impulsive passions of his early years into the complex responsibilities of sovereign power, the man beneath the crown grew ever more layered, sometimes tender, sometimes merciless, always commanding. The echoes of his early loves lingered in the chambers of his mind, their voices like ghostly melodies weaving through the fabric of his days. Catherine of Aragon's steadfast devotion had been the foundation upon which much of his early reign was built, her dignified presence a steadying force amid the swirling tempests of politics and personal desire. Yet, as his affections shifted and the kingdom's demands pressed harder, Henry's heart and court became a kaleidoscope of new faces and shifting alliances. Anne Boleyn's fiery spirit and sharp intellect had set ablaze the very institutions of England, forcing the king to choose between old faith and new power. Their tempestuous relationship was a crucible that forged a new religious order but also left scars that would never fully heal. Jane Seymour's gentle strength had brought a brief, shining light of hope with the birth of Edward, a son whose tiny fingers seemed to clutch the future itself. Her death left a hollow ache that resonated through the halls like a mournful song, a reminder of the fragility that lay beneath even the grandest thrones. Anne of Cleves, the foreign princess whose portrait had promised alliance but whose presence fell short of the king's expectations, was swiftly cast aside. A political pawn spared the fates of others but nonetheless a casualty of royal dissatisfaction. Catherine Howard, with her youthful exuberance and tragic downfall, was a stark lesson in the dangers of youthful indiscretion and the unforgiving gaze of the Tudor court. And then there was Catherine Parr, whose wisdom and compassion became a balm to Henry's aging soul, a companion who navigated the treacherous waters of his later years with both grace and courage. Within the palace walls, the intrigues and whispered secrets never ceased. The court was a living organism, pulsing with ambition, jealousy, and fleeting alliances. Noblewomen vied for favor, courtiers schemed for advancement, and the king's desires and fears shaped the delicate dance of power and affection. Henry himself was both puppet and puppeteer in this grand theatre, wielding his charm and temper with equal force, his moods shifting like the unpredictable English weather, from thunderous fury to warm generosity in the space of a heartbeat. Yet beneath the spectacle and the weight of crown and kingdom, Henry remained a man haunted by the ghosts of lost loves and the relentless passage of time. His story was not merely one of political conquest or dynastic ambition but of human longing and vulnerability, of a heart that sought connection even as it wielded power. As the years unfurled like the rich tapestries hung in the great halls, Henry's life stood as a testament to the profound complexities of love and leadership, a vivid tale woven with passion, pain, and the unyielding pursuit of legacy. In those days before the full blaze of Henry's reign, the palace gardens and stone halls were alive with the restless energy of youth, where the scent of blooming roses mingled with whispered promises and the faint clatter of armored knights training beneath the early morning sun. Henry, still a prince with a wild spark in his eyes, moved through this world like a comet blazing across a midnight sky, unpredictable, brilliant, and impossible to ignore. His early years were a whirlwind of lessons and leisure, of tournaments where the clash of steel rang like thunder and dances where the flicker of candlelight caught the shimmer of silks and jewels. It was a time when the future king tasted the heady thrill of forbidden romance and felt the tug of destiny pulling him inexorably toward the throne. Among the many faces that stirred his youthful heart, Mary Boleyn stood out, her laughter bright and carefree, her beauty a fresh bloom in the garden of courtly love. Their affair was like a stolen melody, brief yet unforgettable, set against the backdrop of political intrigue and dynastic ambition. But the winds of fate would soon shift, carrying Anne Boleyn into Henry's orbit like a fierce and captivating storm. Anne's sharp wit and fiery spirit were as irresistible as they were dangerous, challenging the king in ways that would ignite a revolution within his very soul. Their courtship was marked by secrecy and tension, a game of risk and desire played beneath the watchful eyes of courtiers and the rigid gaze of the church. Henry's passion for Anne was a flame that burned so bright it scorched the very foundations of England's religious order, leading to a break with Rome that shook the continent and reshaped the course of history. Yet amid this upheaval, Henry's youthful escapades continued to weave through the fabric of his life, other lovers and fleeting affairs that added color and complexity to the portrait of a king as human as he was mighty. Some were whispered in secret, others paraded boldly before the court, each encounter revealing different facets of a man searching for connection in a world where love was often entwined with power and peril. These early chapters of Henry's life were not just the prelude to a legendary reign but a vivid saga of passion and politics, where the line between desire and duty blurred, and where the heartbeats of a young prince echoed through the corridors of history, forever shaping the destiny of a nation poised on the brink of transformation. As the years wove themselves into the rich fabric of Henry's life, the fiery passions of his youth began to mellow into something more complex, a bittersweet blend of longing, regret, and the weighty wisdom born of experience. The king who once charged boldly into battles of love and politics now found himself navigating the quieter, more shadowed corridors of memory, where laughter mingled with loss and triumph was tinged with sorrow. The echoes of his loves, Catherine's steadfast grace, Anne's fierce fire, Jane's gentle light, the fleeting brightness of Anne of Cleves and Catherine Howard, and the steady strength of Catherine Parr, resonated like distant melodies, haunting yet beautiful. These women had shaped not only the man but the very course of England, their stories intertwined with his in a tapestry rich with passion and power. As Henry's reign drew to a close, the kingdom stood on the cusp of a new era, one forged in the crucible of his desires and decisions. His children, Edward, Mary, and Elizabeth, carried forward the legacy of a father whose heart had been both a battlefield and a sanctuary. The world he left behind was one transformed, its foundations shaken and reshaped by the tempest of his reign. And though his story neared its twilight, the flames he ignited continued to burn bright, casting light and shadow on the generations to come. The tale of Henry, king, lover, and man, remains a timeless saga, whispered through the corridors of history like a bedtime story told beneath a star-studded sky, forever captivating those who dare to listen. Even as Henry's health waned and the twilight of his reign drew near, the echoes of his earlier passions continued to ripple through the palace halls like the soft murmur of a fading song. The vivid memories of youthful order, the stolen glances exchanged beneath vaulted ceilings, the scent of jasmine mingling with candle wax, the secret laughter that once filled the corridors, lingered like ghosts, refusing to be silenced by time or circumstance. Each of Henry's great loves had left an indelible mark not only on his heart but on the very soul of England. Catherine of Aragon, with her unwavering dignity and fierce loyalty, had anchored the young king's early years, her grace a steadfast beacon amid political storms. Anne Boleyn, fiery and unyielding, had challenged him to defy the ancient powers of church and state. Her sharp intellect and fierce were forever altering the religious landscape. Jane Seymour, gentle and pure, had offered a fragile hope through the birth of Edward, her quiet strength a momentary reprieve from the turmoil. Anne of Cleves, though a brief and politically motivated union, underscored the king's vulnerability to the tides of diplomacy and personal preference. Catherine Howard's youthful exuberance and tragic fall illustrated the perilous intersection of love and ambition, while Catherine Parr's wisdom and compassion provided comfort and stability in Henry's final years. As the kingdom prepared to bid farewell to a monarch whose life had been a tempest of desire, devotion, and destruction, the future lay uncertain but filled with promise. Edward, young and earnest, would soon ascend the throne, carrying the hopes of Protestant reform and a kingdom eager for renewal. Mary's fierce determination to restore Catholicism would ignite fierce conflict, while Elizabeth's sharp mind and indomitable spirit promised an era of flourishing arts and exploration. Henry's story, rich with passion, power, and poignant humanity, had shaped a nation on the brink of transformation. His legacy was not merely the sum of his marriages or political upheavals but the complex, vivid portrait of a man who loved fiercely, ruled decisively, and lived fully, leaving behind a saga that would be told and retold through the ages, a timeless bedtime tale echoing beneath the stars. As the heavy velvet curtains of Henry's chamber swayed gently in the cool evening breeze, the once fierce king lay quiet, his breath shallow, a faint flicker of the passionate fire that had long driven him now reduced to a soft ember. Around him, the palace hummed with anticipation and quiet grief, courtiers and attendants moving like shadows, careful not to disturb the fragile balance between life and death. His thoughts drifted back to a time when the world was younger, when he was a prince with a heart as untamed as the wild horses he raced across the fields of Greenwich. Those early days had been filled with the thrill of discovery, learning the arts of war and statecraft, the intoxicating allure of courtly love, and the heady scent of jasmine and rose that clung to secret trysts in the palace gardens. The memories of Catherine of Aragon's steadfast gaze and gentle hands surfaced, reminding him of the steadfast foundation upon which much of his early life rested. Then came the spark that was Anne Boleyn, a tempestuous force who ignited his soul and changed the course of a nation. Their forbidden love was a tempest that shattered old allegiances and carved a new path for England, filled with danger and desire. Anne's sharp tongue and fierce will challenged him as no other had, and their union, though brief, left a legacy of religious revolution and political upheaval that would echo for centuries. Jane Seymour's tender smile and quiet strength offered a balm for his restless heart, and the birth of Edward brought a fleeting joy that was as fragile as morning dew. Yet even as he sought solace in love, the shadows of court intrigue and betrayal loomed ever near. The youthful laughter of Catherine Howard, so full of promise, was silenced too soon by the cruel hand of suspicion and scandal, a reminder that even the brightest flames can be snuffed out in an instant. Catherine Parr, the wise and compassionate, stood by Henry in his final days, her presence a soothing balm amid the storm. As Henry's eyelids fluttered closed for the last time, the tapestry of his life, woven with threads of love, power, ambition, and loss, was complete. His story, filled with passion and poignancy, would live on in the hearts and histories of those who came after, a timeless saga whispered beneath the stars, forever part of England's enduring legend. The grand halls of the palace, now steeped in solemn silence, bore witness to the passing of an era, a king whose life had been as tumultuous and passionate as the storms that battered England's shores. Henry's death marked the end of a reign defined by relentless ambition and fierce love, a reign that had reshaped the very soul of a nation. Yet even as the crown passed to his young son, the shadows of Henry's desires and decisions lingered, weaving their way into the fate of England's future. In the quiet aftermath, the courtiers whispered tales of the man behind the legend, the youthful prince who had once ridden wild across sun-dappled fields, whose laughter had filled the palace gardens, whose heart had been both a battlefield and a sanctuary. Stories spread of his fiery temper, his boundless charisma, and the tempest of love affairs that had both elevated and undone him. They spoke of Catherine of Aragon's unwavering devotion, a queen whose dignity and faith had inspired loyalty and heartbreak alike. Anne Boleyn's tragic fate was recounted with a mixture of sorrow and awe, her fierce spirit a symbol of defiance and change. Jane Seymour's gentle touch and the brief happiness she brought were remembered as a delicate bloom in a thorny crown. The colourful chapters of Anne of Cleves and Catherine Howard added layers of intrigue and cautionary tales, while Catherine Parr's wisdom and kindness offered a final note of grace. As England stood on the brink of transformation, Henry's legacy loomed large, a complex mosaic of love, betrayal, faith, and power. His children, each bearing the marks of his tumultuous reign, prepared to navigate a kingdom fraught with religious upheaval and political strife. Edward's Protestant zeal, Mary's Catholic fervour, and Elizabeth's cunning resilience promised a future shaped by the echoes of their father's passions. Amid the flickering candlelight and the hushed prayers, the story of Henry, the king, the lover, the man, endured. It became a tale told in whispered legends and grand histories, a bedtime story for a nation forever changed. The vivid tapestry of his life, rich with colour and shadow, continued to unfold in the hearts of those who remembered, a timeless saga woven into the very fabric of England's identity. In the years that followed Henry's passing, the echoes of his tumultuous reign reverberated through the corridors of power and the hearts of the people. His life, a sprawling saga of love, betrayal, and unyielding ambition, became legend, told in hushed tones by candlelight, painted in vivid strokes by chroniclers, and immortalized in the very stones of the castles and cathedrals that bore witness to his triumphs and tragedies. Edward, crowned as a boy, stepped into a world shaped irrevocably by his father's decisions. The young king, cloaked in the weight of expectation, sought to steer England toward a future defined by Protestant reform, carrying the torch ignited by Henry's defiance of Rome. Meanwhile, Mary's fierce devotion to the old faith kindled a fierce counterpoint, a struggle that would set the stage for a kingdom divided, torn between tradition and transformation. Elizabeth, ever the enigmatic phoenix, watched and waited, her sharp mind absorbing the lessons carved from the turbulent lives of her parents. The legacy of Henry's 6 marriages, the alliances forged, the hearts broken, the blood spilled, was a tapestry of human drama that continued to shape the destiny of the realm. Each queen's story was a thread woven into the fabric of history, their lives intertwined with politics, passion, and the relentless pursuit of power. The court remained a place of intrigue and ambition, where whispers could topple kings and love could become a weapon sharper than any sword. Yet beyond the halls of power, the people of England lived with the ripples of Henry's reign, in their faith, their laws, and their very identities. The break from Rome had unleashed waves of change that touched every corner of the kingdom, challenging centuries-old beliefs and igniting fierce debates in village squares and grand cathedrals alike. Henry's story, rich with vivid characters and unforgettable moments, became a timeless narrative, a bedtime tale whispered to generations, filled with the light of passion and the shadows of betrayal. It was a story of a man who dared to rewrite the rules of love and power, whose heartbeats echoed through history like the tolling of cathedral bells, forever marking the dawn of a new England. Long after Henry's footsteps faded from the palace floors and his voice ceased to command the grand halls, the ripples of his life continued to shape the very essence of England's identity. The world he left behind was a kingdom caught between the old and the new, a place where faith and power wrestled in a dance as intricate and perilous as any courtship. Edward, crowned in the shadow of his father's towering legacy, sought to steer England with the fervor of youth, his heart burning with the hope of a reformed church and a modern realm. Mary, fierce and unyielding, rose like a storm, her devotion to the ancient faith a thunderclap that shook the fragile peace. Elizabeth, with eyes sharp as a hawk and a mind honed by the turbulent lessons of her family's past, would emerge as a beacon of stability and brilliance, guiding England through storms of her own. Yet beneath these great historical figures, the stories of the women who had loved and been loved by Henry whispered through the ages, their voices woven into the fabric of legend. Catherine of Aragon's dignified sorrow, and Boleyn's fiery spirit and tragic fall, Jane Seymour's fleeting light, and of Cleve's quiet resilience, Catherine Howard's youthful folly, and Catherine Parr's wisdom. All these threads combined to create a tapestry rich with passion, pain, and the indomitable strength of women who shaped history in their own right. The grand saga of Henry's life, told in the flickering glow of hearth fires and the hallowed halls of learning, became a bedtime story for a nation, a tale of love's triumph and tragedy, of power's seductive allure and peril, of a man whose desires ignited a revolution and whose legacy would echo through centuries. As the stars will overhead and the night wraps the world in its velvet cloak, the story of Henry remains alive, a vivid, untamed flame flickering in the heart of England, forever inviting those who listen to step into the rich, complex dance of history and humanity. In the quiet after the storm, as candles guttered low and the echoes of a king's footsteps faded into the corridors of time, the tale of Henry, lover, ruler, and man, settled into the fabric of history like a whispered legend. His life was a tapestry of fierce passions and delicate sorrows, of towering ambition and tender vulnerability, a story carved into the very bones of England. The women who loved him, the children who carried his blood, and the kingdom forever changed by his desires and decisions stand as living echoes of a reign both magnificent and tragic. Henry's saga invites us to peer beyond the gilded crown and the imposing throne, to see a man whose heart beat with the same hopes, fears, and dreams that shape us all. And as the night deepens and the stars will slowly overhead, that story, rich, complex, and endlessly human, lives on, a timeless bedtime tale whispered beneath the vast English sky.